So Jimmy Rogers leaves Washington State, and the Cougars will have their third head coach in 3 years when the 2026 season kicks off. This is an absolute punch in the gut, and frankly, a little bit lower than that. So over the last 2 seasons, Coug fans have had to endure the Pac-12 collapsing. They're getting left behind. They've gotten to be somewhat optimistic about the rebuild of the Pac-8 state conference that has been made. All 8 schools in the Pac-12 are indeed state schools because you've got Texas State, Utah State, Boise State, Fresno State, San Diego State, Utah State. I might have already said that. Oregon State, Washington State. It's all, you got to have a state to be in that particular conference. So the Pac-State conference has been built, and they've gotten to enjoy that a little. But their men's basketball coach got them to the NCAA tournament, and then he left. He left for a former Pac-12 school that didn't get left out of the Power Four. And then their head coach who said, yeah, I'm going to go to Wake Forest. He might be the ACC coach of the year. He might be co-coach of the year with Tony Elliott at Virginia. That's Jake Dickert, of course. Did an unbelievable job with the Demon Deacons this year. And then Jimmy Rogers comes in, and there is no other way to see that as it was a good hire. Dude was at South Dakota State. Of course, he was asked about and said the right things with regards to loyalty in his press conference, and here we are right back where you started before you hired him. Now, Washington State gets to play a bowl game. At least they get to play a bowl game. Man, how much more can you take? How much more can you take as a fan? Even if you thought when Jimmy Rogers was hired, he probably won't be here forever. He's got the pedigree and the coaching trajectory to go somewhere else. Did you think it would happen this fast? Did you think it would be right now? Because it would have been nice to get at least 2, maybe 3 years out of him. Year 1 went incredibly well. They were one of several teams that I predicted record-wise right on the money. They went 6-6. It's a great first year. Ask Oregon State how hard it's been to be one of the 2 original Pac-12 schools over the last couple of years. They just had one of the worst seasons in Oregon State football history. They lost to Sam Houston at home. Washington State, meanwhile, was going toe-to-toe with Ole Miss in Virginia. So Jimmy Rogers was making a name for himself and was keeping the Washington State brand alive going into a year in which the Pac-12 can absolutely send a team to the college football playoff. We'll see what the format winds up being and how many the group of 5 can get in and how those changes come about. We'll probably find that out when this season comes to a close or close to it sometime in January, because they extended the deadline, of course, because they want to think about all this stuff, which I don't think is actually the worst idea. I think expanding the playoff is the worst idea. It's always the worst idea. But anyway, let's get back to the point here with the Cougs. I don't know how much more you can take as a Washington State fan. I hope it's a lot. I know those fans, and I know they care, but man, everybody's got a breaking point, right? There's a scene, a storyline really, in Star Wars: The Clone Wars, which is a phenomenal television series. Really, really good. Starts out as a kid's show. It does not end as a kid's show. It doesn't. It's big boy television. Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin are captured by some slavers on a planet. And Obi-Wan Kenobi, the entire series, is incredibly strong, powerful, cool, calm, collected under pressure. But then eventually, even as he's put into that horrific environment, it gets to be too much. You start to see his character break a little. And I hope Washington State fans haven't reached that sort of point. But even if you are the strongest willed, most passionate sports fan, how are you feeling? How do you feel anything but just despair and frustration and just That the commitment you put in this year was for nothing. And Jake Dickert said all these things, and John Mateer said all these things, and then they all left, and they just left. And I don't know when it's going to stop. I don't know who you hire to stop the cycle. I've seen Rick Neuheisel get suggested. I've seen reporting that Chip Kelly has had some folks poke around. I don't know what's going to excite the fans in Pullman, but I know that I'm rooting for them. I hope they haven't reached that breaking point as Obi-Wan did in one of those episodes. I really do. Because I know they love the Cougs up there. But man, it's hard to not feel used by Jimmy Rogers. And Jake Dickert said all this stuff, and then when he went through that whole process of we're going to make this big offer to John Mateer, and it wasn't enough, he realized, I can't do this here. I got to go somewhere else. And he's clearly found something at Wake Forest, turned them around pretty quickly. And Washington State has to look from afar. And I think Jimmy Rogers will go to Iowa State. I think he'll have every chance to succeed. And if he does, Washington State fans are just forever going to be the Squidward meme. Looking at Patrick and SpongeBob down there through the window, you're just peering through the blinds like, oh, yeah, I remember when I had fun with things. Like, I really do hope that Washington State fans continue to be resolved to make it work, because you're going into a conference now that has been rebuilt to the best of its ability and is indeed going to have a path to make the college football playoff. Washington State, we forget, under the late Mike Leach, RIP Pirate forever and always, and they were a win in the Apple Cup away from potentially going to the 4-team playoff. They were 10-1. They lost at home to the Huskies. But that program has been up there, and now look at where they're at. They feel like a springboard. So you contrast that with what has happened in Corvallis, where the Beavs have hired Jamarcus Shepard, and at least in the first week or so, he's injected energy and life into the program. And I'm sure Oregon State fans are just hoping he stays for a couple of years and lays some sort of good foundation. He's got a long way to go. So I don't think Jamarcus Shepard could turn that. If he does turn that around, yeah, he might leave. And this is just the unfortunate reality of being ridiculously relegated as Oregon State and Washington State have been, is anytime a coach has success, we're going to ask the question, well, somebody else is going to come hire him because someone else is going to notice, and they're going to say, hey, if you can win out there, you can definitely come and win out here. If Jimmy Rogers can win in year one with South Dakota State transfers to Washington State with that schedule, yeah, we feel like you can win here. Hard to argue with that logic. Yeah, if Jake Dickert can go win at Wake Forest or at Washington State in Pullman, we feel like he can win here at Wake Forest. Well, hard to argue with that because they were right. So, Coug fans, I wish I could give you a more optimistic look. I just don't know what that is. I don't know what that looks like. I hope the conference can provide some stability. And you know what? Not just because it'd be kind of funny, but it might actually work out. I think you should consider hiring Jonathan Smith. I'd hire him before I hired Rick Neuheisel or Chip Kelly. Just saying. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.